The weather's getting a lot colder here and we're starting to get some pretty heavy frosts, so today we're going to harvest the rest of our carrots. We have a few left that we planted early in the season that we've been eating all summer long, and the rest of these were planted specifically for preserving for the coming months. So we're going to harvest all of these today, as well as a couple patches around the garden, and we're going to show you the washing, sorting, and rinsing process after we get those done. We had a pretty rough year as far as it being very dry, and so our carrots this year are a little bit lacking, as most people's were in the area. So we're going to see a lot of really short stubby carrots, but that's okay. They still preserve well, and we'll be happy to have them for the winter. As we harvest them, we're going to go ahead and pull the tops off because we won't use those for preserving. They'll go to the chickens. And we'll put the rest of the carrot, the orange part, on this grate, and then we'll be able to rinse them all before we take them inside for their final washing before we can them. Any of them that have bug damage like this one, the chickens will be more than happy to eat. We'll come back to you guys in a few minutes when we have more of the carrots harvested. The chickens will be super happy to have all these carrot tops, and they'll help them make better eggs. Anything that they don't finish, they'll turn into compost. Chickens are some of the most efficient composters around. Now we'll go check out what we got for a harvest. So here's the carrots that we got out of the garden. A lot of them are very small, and we do know that that's partially because we had a very poor carrot year with moisture, as I previously said, and we also probably should have thinned the carrots more than we did. We are learning to garden as we go, although both of us do have some experience in it, but there are some things that you do have to get used to, like pulling out a lot of the little plants as they start to sprout so that the rest of them can thrive. We're going to give them a little rinse before we take them inside. We'll catch up with you inside and we'll go over a little bit more about the canning process. Carrots, because of their low acidity, have to be pressure canned. They cannot be water bath canned. So we're just finishing cutting up the rest of our carrots, and then we're going to get started on the pressure canning process. So I have all of my jars washed and ready to go, and we have lids and rings that match all of the jars as well. So in this first batch, we're going to go ahead and use all wide mouth jars. It doesn't really matter whether you use wide or narrow mouth for this, but it's easiest if you keep them all the same, because a different number of jars fit in the pressure canner based on whether they're wide or narrow mouth. I'll finish cutting these up and then we'll talk a little bit more about the canning process. Total, we ended up with about 3.5 bowls this size, and so that should be enough to give us somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 jars of carrots. We'll just have to see as we go along how many we actually get. The canner with the large mouth, I believe, holds 18 jars and 20 with the narrow mouth, but it may be 16 and 18. Either way, we'll see what we can get done, and if there's a few extras, we'll probably go ahead and either eat those fresh or put them in the freezer. You want your carrot jars to be filled within an inch of headspace. So basically, that should be up to this bottom line on the canning jar here. You have to leave enough space that when they're pressurized, they don't break the jar or have food sticking out above the liquid. We are going to add hot water to these jars once we're done filling them. With pressure canning, you don't have to sterilize your jars. You just need to start with clean, well-washed jars. And that's because when you pressure can, the heat is high enough for long enough that you don't actually have any risk of bacteria any longer. We use pressure canning on all of our foods that are low acid. So carrots, any sort of vegetable other than tomato, and certain tomato products such as tomato soup, you do also have to pressure can. The only things you really can water bath can are fruits that are high in acid, jams and jellies, stuff like pickles, things that are high acid. Other than that, it all should be pressure canned for safety. And you can pressure can meat. We'll probably show that in another video later on. So today's video isn't intended to actually teach you how to can. We just want to give you a basic overview of the process so you can start to understand exactly how it needs to be done. If you want a more detailed version, you should always consult either the Ball Blue book or another reputable source for pressure canning information. We're using actually the guide that came with our Presto canner, and what it's going to tell us is that we need to can our carrots for 25 minutes at 11 pounds of pressure. We're using a dial gauge canner with a weight. So this dial will tell you what the pressure of the canner is up to, and this weight regulates the pressure in it, and it will not start to rattle like that until it hits 15 pounds of pressure. That's an indicator that you have too much pressure in the canner and you need to reduce your heat. Another great source for canning videos is Guildbrook Farm on YouTube. We watched them a lot when we got started in canning first, and she does an excellent job of explaining everything in the process and making it seem very easy. One of the key steps is making sure that you wipe down your jar rims, and you can do this either with just a damp towel if you're using a food that doesn't have any oils to it, or if you're canning something like meat, you'll want to do that with a white vinegar solution. So you want to place your lid evenly and squarely on top of your jar and go ahead and tighten down your rims fairly securely, but just finger tight. You do want to allow it enough slack so that as the food boils and bubbles in the canner, the air can come out, because that's what's going to allow you to get a good seal on your food. We've started putting the carrots into the canner, and in this case, because they are pints, we do need to double stack them, and we will get 16 in there. You can see that there's 8 down on that lower layer. And when you put them in the canner like this, you should make sure that if you're not using a rack spacer, that you put the jars offset to each other so that they're not sitting directly on top. You don't want them to sit on top of each other like that, because that will cause them to not be able to vent properly. So make sure that they're offset just like that. So we've heated our canner on a fairly high heat until steam started to come out of the steam port where the weight is. Then you wait 10 minutes before putting the weight on the canner. It's now been on there for about 20 minutes, and you can see we're just almost up to 11 pounds of pressure. So now we can start our 25 minutes of pressure canning time. So that does not start until you've reached 11 pounds of pressure. And there is our information on carrots. So you can see that we're supposed to process at 11 pounds of pressure for 25 minutes. So we finished up canning our carrots, and we ended up with a total of 43 jars and 3 canner loads. It did take us most of the day to do that. Something important to remember when you're pressure canning, that it does take a considerable amount of time above and beyond the processing time because of the heating and cooling of the canner. We're excited about how many jars of carrots we got, because we did have a less than ideal harvest, and we're looking forward to putting our new skills to work next year and hoping for an even better harvest then.